Folks know he's from New Hampshire. Folks know that he worked for Americans for Prosperity, that he was a staffer in the U.S. Senate. They know that he is the second hardest working person I've ever seen. And they know that he is the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week champion for President Donald Trump and the architect of that first campaign. What they don't know is that he is a family man. He is a man of faith. He is a friend, and I am honored to have him here tonight to talk to you about his experiences and where we're going on the 2020 campaign. The man closest to Donald Trump in the country right now, Corey Lewandowski.
Thank you, Michael. You know, I've known Michael a long time, and so it's a privilege to be back here in North Carolina, and the reception I received is just a little nicer than in front of Congress, which maybe you guys saw some of that testimony, right? You know, just a couple months ago, I had that fun, exciting privilege to sit in front of Chairman Jerry Nadler. Remember that guy? And President Swalwell, Maxine Waters, and you know, so many of these clowns. Do you remember the congressman from Georgia? I think he's from, Hank Johnson. He said, "Mr. Lewandowski, trying to get an answer from you is like trying to gut a fish with a spoon." And I said, "I don't even know what the hell that means." And I said, "Congressman, aren't you the guy who said if we put too many people on Guam, it's going to tip over?" Which is what he said. I mean, these are the geniuses who are representing us sometimes in Washington, D.C. And then the other guy asked me if I was the bag man or the body man or the mean man. I said, "Look, I'm the good-looking man." And he didn't know what to say. I thought I was a good-looking man. But you know, Congress, and you guys have now seen this whole fake impeachment fiasco that followed, the fake Russia collusion narrative, anything they can do to defeat this president because they know they can't beat him at the ballot box, so they want to beat him in the court of public opinion. You know, we've seen this now for 3 years. And it's amazing the resolve that this president has. And I had the privilege and opportunity to spend a few hours with him on Friday of last week in the Oval Office. And I get an amazing privilege to travel with him a bunch and talk to him. And what's amazing to me is how broad his shoulders are and how he wakes up every single day and he says the same thing. Who are we fighting for today? What's our mission and how do we make America great again? And it's a message that I've heard from all of his guys who have been his body guys, from Keith Schiller, who was with him for 20 years, to Jordan, to Nick, to all the guys who stand outside the president's residence waiting for him to make the walk from his residence into the Oval Office. Every day he wakes up fighting for this country. To make it that it's okay to be an American again, to be proud to be a member of the greatest country in the world. Because for too long, we had presidents who wanted us to apologize. For us to go out and say, "Hey, you don't have to pay your fair share. We'll pay for it all. We'll be the policemen of the world. We'll take our men and women in uniform and we'll go protect your country even though there's no interest for us." This president said no more. The 30 years of failed foreign policy have come to an end in Washington, D.C. because of what Donald Trump has said. He said if we don't have a strategic reason to have our men and women in uniform in those countries, let's bring them men and women home, because that's where they belong. He told our allies across the world, you're going to pay your fair share to NATO because we're all done paying for everybody else. We're the richest, most prosperous, most generous country in the world, but we're done being taken advantage of. He told our enemies, you put chemical weapons into innocent men, women, and children, and we'll put Tomahawk missiles into your country like we did in Syria, unlike Barack Obama, who drew a line in the sand, and they walked over it, and they walked over it, and they walked over it. What our enemies now understand is this is not a president to be trifled with. This is a man who understands the military might of this country, who through his leadership has rebuilt our military and rebuilt it in a manner that is commensurate with the greatest country in the world. But you know, when you turn on the news, you don't see any of those things. You don't see the media talking about the historic low unemployment numbers, 50-year lows right now, more Americans working today than ever in our nation's history. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, and women, their lowest unemployment rates in recorded history. You don't hear that. You hear the doom and gloom. You don't hear about the $9.2 trillion in stock market value that have occurred since Donald Trump's election in November of 2016. You don't hear that the Dow is up 27% this year. You pick up the newspaper, and every day you'd think we're back in a recession, that nobody's working again, that the new normal under Barack Obama was 1.2% growth rate. And when this president puts a 3 up on the board, they say, well, it's really not because of his policies. You don't hear about the historic tax cuts that this president forced Congress to implement. Ones that allows every middle-class American to have $5,000 more in their pocket today than they did 2 years ago. You don't hear about that because that doesn't fit the media narrative. Here are the words you hear from the media. The walls are closing in. Donald Trump may have had a heart attack this weekend. Bernie Sanders had a cardiac incident. Donald Trump may have had a heart attack this weekend. And that the president isn't going to make it, and we're going to have Mike Pence as the next president of the United States. That's what you hear when you turn on MSNBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, the worst of the worst, and all the others. And it's so frustrating to me, because I sit there with the president, and I see what really goes on, and I don't know how he gets up and he continues to fight every day, but I'm thankful he does. Because the president that I know, the side of the president that no one talks about is how magnanimous and gracious and humble and funny and self-deprecating he is in private. And what he's done for my family, I can never repay. Last Thanksgiving, almost a year ago, and this is a regular occurrence, we're sitting around my dining room table, my wife, my mom, my 4 kids, and just playing cards like you do, waiting for food to get made. And I might be the last guy in America who still has a home phone line, but I have a home phone, and the phone rang, and my 8-year-old yelled, "Dad, the president's calling!" Because he calls the house, so it's kind of cool. So I go and I answer the phone, and I step away from the table, and the president says, "Hey, Corey, just wanted to call and say, happy Thanksgiving, hope you and your family have a great time." He was down in Florida. And then he says, "Hey, your kid's there." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, can you put me on speakerphone? I'd like to talk to him." And I said, "Of course." So I called my kids over, and I said, "Hey guys, the president's on the phone, he wants to say something, can you come over?" And so they're all kind of standing around, and I put on the speakerphone, and then the president said, "Hey, I just want to say something. I'm the president of the United States because of your dad. And if you don't think that's a humbling thing for a kid who grew up in a single-parent household in Lowell, Massachusetts without any privilege, not only to have met the president of the United States, but to have him say something like that to my children, that's why I'll do anything I can to help this president." And while I know it's not true that, I'm not the reason that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He's the reason he's the president of the United States, and you're the reason he's the president of the United States. And I had a small role in that 2016 campaign in helping chart a course that brought us to victory. But let me tell you where we are in 2020, and I serve as the senior advisor of the 2020 campaign. I was at the campaign all day on Friday. The Democrats don't think the 2020 campaign is about Donald Trump's brand, and that this is all just a marketing campaign so we can go sell more books and get a bigger contract for The Apprentice. They don't think that this is just something that's a fluke that he's not really taking seriously, because he's the president of the United States and they know he can win. So they are more motivated than ever. If you think that they're going to do what Crooked H did, which was take a week off at a time to go get ready for debates and forget where Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania is, you're sorely mistaken. Look at their election results in the last 2 weeks. The governor of Kentucky, Matt Bevin, who's a friend of mine, ran behind every other statewide office holder in Kentucky, and all the others won, and the incumbent governor of Kentucky lost, and they blamed Donald Trump for that loss. And then, on Saturday of this week, John Bel Edwards, the incumbent governor of Louisiana, who's a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, incumbent governor, Democrat, won re-election by 2 percentage points, and they blamed Donald Trump that the Republican didn't win down there. Because that's what the media is going to do. They didn't say that 7 out of 8 statewide elections on election night, Republicans won. They said Donald Trump lost in Kentucky, and now Donald Trump lost in Louisiana, and this is what the precursor is. And I can tell you this, the Democrats are motivated. They're highly energized. They are doing everything they can to get their people registered to turn them out. They know that if they can compete in North Carolina and in Florida and move 10,000 votes in Michigan, whoever they nominate is going to be the next president of the United States. Look, we were very fortunate on election night. And I remember, because unfortunately I was sitting on CNN's dais when the poll numbers came in. We got what was called exit polls. And at 5 o'clock, the exit polls came back in and they said, of the 11 states, Donald Trump is down in 9, up in 1, and tied in 1. We said the race is over, can't win, impossible. Until we found out that the exit polls were actually not really exit polls, and they were, just like everything else, fake news. And so Donald Trump and the family got on the phone, they started making phone calls on election night, calling radio shows and making sure people turned out to vote. And then you remember it vividly, and I remember it vividly. The poll numbers started coming in. And Wolf Blitzer and John King were at the magic wall on CNN. And Donald Trump was up 133,000 votes in Florida. And they said, we can't call the race yet. There are 6 votes outstanding in Miami-Dade County. And I said, hey, fellas, I went to a public school, but I can add, okay? 133,000, 6 votes outstanding. I think we're going to win Florida. And then after we won Florida, what happened? North Carolina came in. Woo! And when we won in North Carolina, the momentum started to build. And I remember very vividly what transpired next. We started winning in Ohio and Iowa. And then all of a sudden, Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. And literally the ground in Manhattan on the island started to shake. Because Crooked H, if you don't remember, was at the Peninsula Hotel, which is literally a golf ball hit away from Trump Tower. And she was there for the sole purpose of trolling us to say that she was going to win the election. And as I sat there on the set on CNN, again, I went to a public school, but I can add, kinda, right? I said, hey, 270, we're way over. And I said to Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN, at 10:30, and I said, call the race. Donald Trump's the next president-elect of the United States. So we can't call the race. There's still some votes outstanding. And the night went on and on and on. And then finally, at about 2 a.m., when we knew the race was ours, and the Associated Press had called Kellyanne Conway, who was then standing next to Mr. Trump, and said, I'm sorry, what state are you calling? And they said, we're not calling a state, we're calling the race. Donald Trump is now the president-elect of the United States. I remember I turned to Jeff Zucker, and he turned to me, and David Axelrod was on the dais, and all the other haters, right, were up there with me, telling me how great Crooked Hillary's turnout operation was. They knew what color underwear you were wearing, what you had for breakfast, what color car you had. They had the greatest operation ever. And Jeff Zucker said, Corey, you must be magnanimous. And I said, yeah, no effing way. Okay, I'm not being magnanimous for anything. We just won. And I walked off the set of CNN that night and I quit. And I said, this is how dishonest the media is. They knew Donald Trump was the winner and they refused to call it because they didn't want to give him the satisfaction. And I sat there and I listened to everybody make excuses of why Hillary Clinton couldn't come out and make a concession speech. Van Jones told me, she's tired. I said, tired? Thank God she's not the president. I mean, she's tired. It's 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock, give me a break. And so it all started right then when the media, whose narrative was Donald Trump could never win, realized they had been lying to the American people for months and months. And those lies have continued to today. They've continued to today when we hear from little Adam full of Schiff, who told us that there was unequivocal evidence, unequivocal, he's seen it, that there was obstruction of justice and Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. Remember? He saw the evidence. And then we've got our great friend, President Swalwell, right, who's also seen the evidence. These guys are such hypocrites. But Donald Trump gets up and fights back every day. And so look, we all have our own way of helping this president. We all have our own special thing that we do, whether it's giving money, thank you, it's important. Whether it's knocking on doors, making phone calls, recruiting more people, going on TV, and fighting the false narrative. Thank you. But it's not enough. And what you've done in this county needs to be replicated. People need to understand this county has had great electoral success. But if we don't expand on that, the Democrats will. They know the state of North Carolina is a battleground state. They know that Tom Tillis is somebody that they're going to target and spend $100 million against. Because if they beat Tom Tillis and they beat Donald Trump in North Carolina, they're going to have the next president of the United States and a Democrat senator there. And if that doesn't scare you to be more motivated, then I don't know what does. Because the only thing that scares me more than that is Speaker AOC. Because that's where Congress is going. Don't kid yourself. Nancy Pelosi is the moderate. The self-described left-wing liberal from San Francisco is the moderate in that caucus today. Because Rashid Tlaib and AOC are driving the Democrat narrative. Jerry Nadler has an opponent from the left, and that's what this is about, is playing to that left, far left progressive base. So I ask you to do more. I ask you to work harder. You will not outwork this president. I've had the opportunity to see this guy work and not sleep for days on end. So I ask you to do as much as you can to help, because he will do as much as he can to set the direction of our country for the better. And not for the people in this room by and large, but for our children and our grandchildren who don't have the opportunity to fight the same way we do. To get up and stand up for what we believe in and put our values forward. Because if Donald Trump loses this election, it's not just about the Supreme Court. It's about a way of life. This election is capitalism versus socialism. This election is about understanding that just because you step foot in this country illegally doesn't make you an American citizen. You don't get free education. You don't get free health care. There's a process to come here. I'm going to hold people accountable just like every other country in the world does. So, look, I'm so honored to be here. I'd love to take some questions if you guys are okay with it. I'm going to be as open and honest as I can be with you guys if I don't get myself in trouble, which I'm very prone to do. So, let me start with